All right, I'm starting it now. I told you a little bit about it, Luke. I don't know how much. What did I go into in the general earlier today? I think I just said that I have just a Catholic video for us to review and refute. It's not an entire video that we're gonna watch here. Honestly, it's worthy of a full call. But the clip that we're watching from the full length video is only going to be about like 5 minutes long or so. But like I said, it's worthy of a big discussion. And I think I told you, Luke, that it has to do with Mary. It's so just amazing here. So and I wonder if you've maybe already seen this video. I don't know if you have, Luke, but
Your screen
patristic
is,
pillars, right?
oh, of course,
Yeah,
William Albrecht.
Albrecht. Yeah, and so he made this video basically with this. He did it, and then he also had this guy on named what was his name? Dr. Howell. Dr. Howell. He introduces Dr. Howell as not just a Catholic apologist like he is, but he says that Dr. Howell is specifically a Chrysostom like expert scholar. Like he's centered around specifically Chrysostom. That's how he's introduced. And so what they address is not all of the Chrysostom passages that we're aware of course, that we've made known to everybody through the website and whatnot concerning his comments on Mary. They just focus on the one from Matthew here, Luke, from his homily 44 on Matthew.
Hmm.
You know this one. So
It'd be interesting. Yeah,
yes,
I've seen him react to this stuff before. I mean, I have that one clip where he says Chrysostom's the only one who really thinks that she committed a sin, and he says that is very unfortunate.
he must be contradicting himself because he says something else here. They kind of what's fascinating about this, and I'm gonna start it here in just a second, but they really try and throw out as many arguments as they can. So it's really just before we watch it here, there are five arguments that they make concerning this. Now, if you guys don't remember specifically which one the homily 44 had to do with from Chrysostom, it's the
Your
one where
screen's
he's
loading.
talking about how when Mary and the brothers went and interrupted Christ's teaching when he was with the disciples, and then they had come outside, they were outside and they were calling for him. And you guys remember he says that there would have been nothing of credit, no profit for Mary to have simply borne Christ in the womb if she hadn't virtue, if she didn't possess virtue. And he calls it superfluous vanity. And he says that that she had the sickness that and an infirmity that needed to be healed from Christ, that needed to be rebuked, and that she was seized by, along with the brothers, they were seized by a tyrannical passion. So we'll talk about that here. We're going to get into it. But they really, this is a great video, Luke, because I think that this will really encourage everybody. This is really the best that they have to offer. This is the best rebuttal argument that they could possibly make about Chrysostom here. And again, like I said, they make five different arguments. There isn't really like one coherent argument that just shuts it all down and clears it all up and supports and aligns with the Catholic position. But they know they're kind of, even the scholar here, the so-called Chrysostom scholar, I think he more than William here knows that they're on shaky ground. So he throws out even more arguments. The first argument that they say is that, well, superfluous vanity might not necessarily be a sin. It might just be like just a neutral thing. That's the first thing that they say. So they try throwing that out first. The second is they say, well, actually, if you look at the full context and you don't quote mine it, the full context actually supports the Catholic view because the whole context, as they say, is about Chrysostom praising Mary for being a faithful disciple. They actually say
Hmm.
that. And
What a
then the third
liar!
argument they make is that Chrysostom, again, this is just them throwing it out. They completely undermine. They're like, Chrysostom is, by the way, you have to keep in mind, they say Chrysostom is actually writing at an early time also. So this is before the doctrine was crystallized. So they make that argument. And then they say For the fourth one, they say Chrysostom is merely suggesting an unsubstantiated speculation. They're like, well, he's just speculating anyway. So it's like, which is it? Is it not a sin, or is Chrysostom, in agreement with the Catholic view, or is he just an early Neanderthal that doesn't know what he's talking about, and he's just basically speculating about a slander against a righteous woman? And then finally, the fifth argument they make is just again to undermine Chrysostom. They're like, by the way, you should know Chrysostom has a track record of selectively misrepresenting Scripture. So they throw all of this out there. The first one they hope is just everybody will bite. They'll say, like, the more simple-minded people will just accept the first argument, and then they throw in a couple additional arguments for anyone that's like, I don't know, Chrysostom really seems to be saying something else here. So it's really like a desperation mode is what this video is, and I think it will cheer everyone up. It'll give them a lot of confidence about this, because again, this is like this is an older man, this scholar. If anyone can debunk what we're saying about this here, it would be one of these guys. So I'll go ahead and get my screen starting to share here. Is there anything else you want to say on that, Luke, before we start?
Lots of things. I mean, one of them is just that everybody will find that somebody being called a scholar means absolutely nothing. Really what matters is honesty. And anybody can learn the same things that scholars know. You don't have to have some kind of huge intellectual capacity. It does help, though, if you have a larger than normal intellectual capacity, because that way you can actually refute their very clever arguments. So yeah, I guess we're doing this again. Isaiah, your quotation, is he in here? Yeah, Isaiah, your quote that you found from Jerome the other day, where he said, just as the Virgin Mary, the Mother of the Lord, holds the first place among all women, even so this day is the Mother of days among all days. So here, I'll post that in the lounge chat. So, Nolan, I heard you say that these guys were saying, well, we know. Or maybe I was looking at it on my screen. But, I mean, I've got this quote, Nolan. Here, I'll also put this in here if you guys want to see this video. But William Albrecht says, the thing is, these fathers wouldn't have believed Mary was a sinner, because while Basil may have talked about Mary in that way, meaning talking about her committing a sin, he also called her Holy Mother of God. So, like, they'll say things like that as if that means they don't think she committed sins. So,
Right.
Your quote the other day, Isaiah, is great, where you've even got Jerome saying, oh, she is the greatest of all women. But Jerome believes she committed sins. So, these things are not mutually exclusive. Both of these things can be true at the same time. There's just so many clever arguments they'll make, like using a quote from somebody saying she's the Mother of God, and then they'll just try to assume that means she's sinless, and they'll try to convince you, like, they're like, what? Don't you see? That obviously means she's sinless. Don't you see that? And they'll try to make you feel stupid if you don't see something that's clearly not there. But no, there is no statement about her sinlessness by calling her the Mother of God.
Yeah, like I said, it's just
screen.
desperation. That's why they're throwing everything out and hoping that one of the arguments will stick with one of the individuals who's watching it. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, I am able to see it.
So what I suggest before I start this here is, like I mentioned, now it's like you said, it's going to be a long, not a super long call here, but it's going to be a long call, like, because there's a lot to unpack here. But since it's a shorter clip, like I said, it's only like about 4 minutes. I suggest we just watch and listen to those 5 arguments that I mentioned. We hear what they make. We see how they make it. We see if, how good they are. We're allowing them to, we're puffing out our chest and saying, take your best shot and let them hit us. And let's see, how well they can do. And then we'll let the clip play out. And then once it's done, we'll go over the arguments that they make. How does that sound?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's play it.
All right. Let me know if you can hear it.
Well, if we go back to the quotation, of course, these...
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. All right. I'm starting it over just a little.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, if we go back to the quotation, of course, this is commenting on the famous passage where, they come to Jesus and say, your mother and your brothers are outside. I'm looking for you. And he says, who is my mother and so forth. And of course, the main point of that passage is when Jesus says that he who does the will of God is my mother and my sister, my brother, and so forth. Well, um, so he seems to say here very clearly that she did this out of a, as you as it's translated, superfluous vanity. She wanted to show that she had power and authority over him. Now, that is not necessarily a sin, because it may, as you say, be simply, it would be natural for a mother to exercise authority over her son, even over her
Right.
adult son, because of the sense of reverence and respect that they had for parents back then, which we've lost, of course. But in any case, if he's attributing some kind of a fault to her, um, again, that doesn't mean that he's gotten everything right. We
Yeah.
don't necessarily have to agree with that particular point. Um, but he does stress, that even Mary, and I think this is what Jesus is saying in that text, even his own mother is to be commended, but not because she's his mother, so much as because she's a faithful disciple. She
Right.
does the
Nolan, if you want
will
to
of
pause it.
God. And so,
You couldn't. You're
There's
just
too much
dying.
to say. Too much to say. All right, maybe I should share screens here, but if you want here, I'll drop a link here. So I'm a little. It's a coincidence that this happened today. So I'm giving you a link to New Advent, Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologiae, where he goes over every single little facet of the church's doctrine. He never did finish this thing, but it's a huge work. So he has one on vainglory. And he says this was superfluous vanity, and then elsewhere he says she's guilty of vainglory. Now, this is what he says. Um, he says Gregory the Great reckons vainglory among the 7 capital vices. Here is a quotation of what he says here. He says, I answer that the capital vices are enumerated in 2 ways. For some reckon pride as one of their number, and these do not place vainglory among the capital vices. Gregory, however, reckons pride to be the queen of all vices, and vainglory, which is the immediate offspring of pride, he reckons to be a capital vice, and not without reason. For pride, as we shall state further on, denotes inordinate desire of excellence. But whatever good one may desire, one desires a certain perfection and excellence therefrom. Wherefore the end of every vice is directed to the end of pride, so that this vice seems to exercise a kind of causality over the other vices, and ought not to be reckoned among the special sources of vice, known as the capital vices. And then he goes on to say, it is a capital vice. He explains all the reasons why. This is a huge section just on vainglory. And here's another funny, really hilarious coincidence of today. Trent Horn. I mean, the Catholic Church all accepts vainglory to be a sin. Let's see here. Trent Horn, our boy, he just released a video. Check out this video right here, Nolan. Why don't you go ahead and open this video and like listen to the part where I am. This is called, Trent Horn just released this video, what is it? Yesterday? It's called The Deadly Sin Nobody Talks About. Do you know what it is?
Do I know
It's
what?
vainglory.
Ah, yes, that makes sense, considering
And
the
he's talking about how
familiar.
TikTokers and people who are doing looks maxing and who are just extremely vain and always looking for praise. He says these people are guilty of the capital vice of
Oh,
vainglory.
look, Kenodoxia. Look. I'm gonna show
There it
you.
is.
Let me find it. If I can, here it is. Kenodoxia. Whence it is clear that nothing but vainglory, kenodoxia. This is actually the word Paul uses, by the way, in Philippians. He says, "Do not do this thing." He says it explicitly. Do not do kenodoxia. So he even has it right here. It's so funny that, yeah, that he did make that video here. How that worked out.
Yes, the the Catechism of the Catholic Church, all of them, they all say this is a vice. They all accept it as a vice. They teach it officially everywhere. But their top teachers like Thomas Aquinas and others will say, "Oh yeah, this is a sin. This is a vice. Vainglory is not just some benign, harmless thing." We've got their top apologists like Trent Horn making videos yesterday on this topic saying this is a serious sin. And yeah, John Chrysostom says she is committing a sin here.
And even referring to the same Greek word that Chrysostom explicitly uses, he uses a couple to describe the vainglory, and they all mean the same thing, but yeah, he uses that exact same one, so that's so funny right here. But let's go
Look,
ahead.
here's the Holy See. You know, this is the official Vatican.va. This is the official Catholic website where they release all of the Pope's statements. But in here he made this statement I just posted for you where he says, "And now we come to the second vice we are examining today, vainglory. It goes hand in hand with the demon of envy, and together with these two vices are characteristic of a person who aspires to be the center of the world, free to exploit everything and everyone, the object of all praise and love." So they definitely consider this a sin, guys. You can go anywhere in the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, they all consider vainglory to be among the vices.
Yes.
So this is real crazy. This guy says, "Oh, he's not. Chrysostom isn't actually accusing her of any sin here. Like, how stupid does he think people are?"
I have more to say on that point, but let's go ahead and resume the video for now. We'll hear the arguments that they make about this passage.
Go ahead.
It's only a couple minutes left here, and then we'll go ahead and review this nonsense. So I'll go ahead and resume it.
So, as you said at the very beginning, he's not ashamed of coming into the world through her womb, which he would not have done had he had any doubt about her holiness, right? And it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean at this time either that during this period of history that the idea of Mary's sinlessness was crystal clear to everyone, right?
Yeah.
It's something that comes over time, and you begin to see that. So again, I think that what we're looking here is we're looking at a man who's trying to come to grips with what the text of Scripture is saying, and he's trying to give it its full weight of authority, but perhaps wrongly, he ascribes something to Mary that it doesn't really, necessarily apply to her.
And I would add that it does seem to me, as you read on, and again, this is why context is so important, because if you read on, it doesn't end at that paragraph for St. John Chrysostom. He goes into the following one, and if you read what he says, again, it does seem like this is more speculation, where he says, perhaps Mary gave in to a purely human feeling. She's a human being. As a human being,
right.
She has faults. He says, perhaps. He's not saying it is a certainty. He's saying, perhaps. These are a lot of speculations from St. John Chrysostomos. And I want to be very clear for the audience that to attempt to use John Chrysostom, in my opinion, as one who is just outright saying, well, Mary's a sinner and what have you, I think that would be definitely incorrect in that regard, because if you read the full context of him, these are a lot of speculations, and he does bring that out rather than him saying, well, she definitely did this. This is a certainty. Would that be a fair reading of him here, Dr. Howell?
Well, I think so. Now, the other thing that we have to remember is that St. John Chrysostom sometimes, I can give you a particular example. I talk about this in this new book that I'm writing. And this is it sounds like it's off the subject, but it's a parallel situation. You remember in John 19:34, it says that the soldier stuck his lance in Jesus' side, and out came blood and water, right? Well, in several texts, he quotes this a number of times, and he talks about blood and water. But in other times, he quotes it and says that water came out first and then blood. Right? He reverses the order. Now, why does he do that? Because he says the water represents baptism, and that comes first. And the Eucharist, or blood, represents the Eucharist, and that comes second. So he says, and he even says at one point, he didn't say blood. He didn't say blood and water. He said water and blood. And he actually reverses what John is saying. You have to understand, too, that ancient interpreters of Scripture sometimes felt this ability to maybe switch things around in order to make a point. It's not that they are always got in their mind, oh, I've got to say exactly what Scripture says. What they're saying is, what I want to do is to emphasize how this event of Jesus.
So essentially, he doesn't remember. He lies about whether the water came first or the blood came first. And Chrysostom's just kind of like an idiot. An idiot and also a liar. He misrepresents the scripture a lot. You have to keep that in mind when he's talking about Mary. And he's a Neanderthal. He existed right at the beginning of Christianity when they were babies and they were still figuring it out over 3 centuries after the resurrection. So, yeah, that's pretty much the entire clip that I wanted to share here, Luke. What do you think about this? Go ahead.
Well, how many videos have we done on this? I always look forward to having a debate with the Catholics on this subject because they will just be annihilated. You will never encounter more denial, more inability to read, like sudden loss of the ability to read words on a page than when you're talking to a Catholics about Mary's sins. Nolan, you've got the purple highlights. I assume they match the highlights here. When he says that perhaps too she had some human feeling, he's talking about a separate subject. I mean, these guys are such liars to say, read the context. That's where Chrysostom is switching to a different subject, but he's very confident that she was guilty of superfluous vanity. He says, how about this statement here? He says, their regard for him was as towards a mere man, and they were vainglorious. He casts out the disease, not insulting, but correcting them, being minded to heal their infirmity. So he's talking about their sickness here. He uses words like he gave them a reproof. They were guilty of a tyrannical passion. He did this to convince her that he was not her son only, but also her Lord. He says, they did not imagine as yet anything great concerning him. And
Yeah.
he says he was blaming her.
Yes.
With much authority.
Well, not just
how many words?
He says, so like on the first point, because the first argument that they make, they say that superfluous vanity, it might not be a sin. It might be just something kind of neutral that needed to be fixed, but it wasn't itself like a moral sin. But, putting aside what we were saying earlier about the exact word that is used as far as vainglory and these other examples from the fathers clearly showing, even the Catholics admitting that vainglory is a sin, even if we just had to work within the framework of just this passage from Chrysostom, like you were just saying there, Luke, he explicitly says that the apostle blames her. Let me see here. He says the evangelist. He says, and this too, the evangelist shows, that is, like clearly demonstrates or manifests, that he is blaming, he is accusing. This word right here, this means to accuse or charge with like a criminal, with a crime, a criminal fault, a crime, a sin, obviously within the context. And he also, Chrysostom, he refers to the superfluous vanity as a disease which requires healing and correction. And that disease terminology is not something, you wouldn't say the apostles accusing, charging of sin, or that there was a disease which existed, an illness which required healing and correction if no sin hadn't been committed. So it's so obvious that clearly Chrysostom understands this to be an immoral sin that was committed here. That's so easy to prove.
If you look at that debate I had with Michael Snellen, you'll just see us go over all these points. He pushed hard on every little sentence, and it was hopeless. It's obvious that Chrysostom is accusing her of committing sin. I wish they would just switch to that defense as quickly as possible, just to say that he's wrong, because I know that William Albrecht elsewhere has just said, Chrysostom's wrong, like in that little clip. I time-stamped it if you want to play that. I've played it before, where he says, that is unfortunate.
Do you think that was an older clip? Because this is from 2022.
The one I'm looking at here is 3 years ago, also December 8th, 2022. So same year.
Very strange. Yeah, a little bit later. I think the older guy here, Dr. Howell, is a little bit more in the know, and he's kind of worried about it because he is trying to like lead in with. Again, there's that first sign of desperation by saying, maybe superfluous vanity isn't a sin, and then
Go get me a
there's
diaper morning. Oh, sorry, no, I meant to be muted.
and then there's a then right after he leads in with that, he does really try and convince the audience throughout the remainder of the time that he speaks that Chrysostom is not someone that we necessarily have to agree with. He might be saying something that's not accurate to the New Testament, and just kind of reducing him down to like fallible man like a Protestant would. And so
I love how he calls his channel Patristic Pillars. That would be a great great name for our channel. But no, they don't really care. They're going to pick and choose. They've got some that they like more, some that they like less. Man, the Catholics, though, have so many popes, so many doctors saying that Mary committed sins, or at least just outright condemning the Immaculate Conception. So they're in a lot of trouble. So the Orthodox have their favorite guys that say Mary committed sins, and then the Catholics' favorite guys say that Mary committed sins. No matter where you turn, their favorite and top teachers are saying that she committed sins.
yeah,
It's totally hopeless for them, guys. This is one of the easiest debates to ever have.
it really is, and the arguments are just so weak. They're so very weak. I find the that second argument that they gave is so strange when they say, Chrysostom, in the full context, he's actually praising Mary for being a faithful disciple, he says, in the context of what a faithful learner that you interrupt the teaching for something completely random, which Chrysostom talks about here, by the way. But they put a lot of emphasis on this part when he says, even to have borne Christ in the womb and to have brought forth that marvelous birth has no profit if there be not virtue. Of course, virtue with it. And part of the reason that this is strange is because even in this clip, this older man here, he says, that Jesus would not have chosen Mary to give birth to him. He wouldn't have chosen him as his mother if she wasn't sinless. So if that's the basis, if the basis here in truth, in reality, is that Jesus could only have been born from a mother who never committed sins, then you would have to acknowledge that Chrysostom's entire point here, which they're trying to emphasize, you would have to acknowledge that Chrysostom is teaching a meaningless lesson about an impossible scenario. Because there would be no possible outcome where Mary receives no credit for giving birth because she's lacking virtue if Mary's entire eligibility to even become his mother is based on her being sinless. This is a really strange thought from Chrysostom. If that's a base foundation for the entire thing, you'd be thinking of something that you wouldn't even think about. But even if they tried, they could respond to that. They would say, well, he's just making a really extreme hypothetical example. Like he's giving an example that's not even possible. He's saying, even if it were possible, it's a hypothetical lesson. But it doesn't change the fact that what we just said earlier, that he does assert that the disease was a reality. It did happen. It was a real disease that needed to be cured. So it's a situational lesson. It's not hypothetical. It's born out of a situation that happened in history. But what a strange idea.
They ignore that other statement. Chrysostom says that the reason God sent an angel to speak to Mary quickly and announce her conception is because if he had let time go by where her belly swelled with a growing baby and she didn't know where it came from, that she would have just assumed maybe like somebody had done something, in her sleep or something, and she would assume that she had lost her virginity and that she would kill herself. That's what John Chrysostom said she probably would have done. He says that's what, any woman in her situation would have done. So John Chrysostom does not believe this girl is incapable of sinning. Obviously, killing yourself is one of the worst possible sins. Anybody could pull up those quotes. We've got all those quotes saved. Also, I want to mention one other thing about this whole situation, which we have never mentioned before. But, interrupting the Lord while he's teaching, for any reason, is you better have a good reason. I mean, it had better not be something stupid. There are a few instances in the New Testament where, while Christ is teaching, somebody comes over quickly and it's an emergency usually. It's somebody who's dying or is sick or has died, and they're begging Jesus to come help. And they are expressing their faith in him when they're doing that because they know he has the power to help, to heal them. But Mary interrupted Jesus for the worst possible reason. There is absolutely no excuse for her interruption. She did not interrupt him because she had some important news for him. Even that would have been less than interrupting him because somebody had died and they needed to be healed. In fact, her interruption this time was not even as bad as the miracle at Cana, because John Chrysostom also tells her. He also says that was a sin. Every church father who commentates on that says Mary was sinning by telling Jesus, "Hey, they ran out of wine. You got to do something about it." They all say that is superfluous vanity too, that she's looking for some credit for herself. But no, why did Mary interrupt Jesus? It says she wished to seize him because he had lost his mind. That's what it says. His family members thought that he had lost his mind or had gone out of himself, out of his mind. It's a word for insane or somebody who's just completely beside themselves and not really thinking. That's what Mary thought about him. She wanted him to stop teaching. That's the reason she interrupted. Jesus needs to stop teaching right now.
Yes.
So it's the worst possible reason to interrupt him. And every church father who commentates on that says the same thing, and they include Mary in it.
Yes, she is mentioned explicitly. She's with the brothers, and she's, the actual mother. Like they want to say, like, consider who would have more authority over you, your siblings to call you out or your mother. Obviously, your mother has, like, more authority to call you because you're her child. So that is, of course, she was playing, the main role there with the brothers. And she had the
And
most authority out
unfortunately,
of all of them in a natural
she's
sense.
the most culpable.
Yeah,
Nolan, she's also the most culpable because she is his mother. She is
that's
the
what I'm
one who
saying,
should
yeah.
know him the best. She
Yeah,
should know that
true.
he's sinless.
Truly.
She is more guilty than anybody else for what is being done here because of her close relationship with Jesus. Contrary to what the Catholics say, they say the close relationship with Jesus is what guarantees her sinlessness. In reality, her close relationship with Jesus, being his mommy, is what made it so difficult for her to accept that he was the Son of God and was divine. Because parents, always look down on their children, always see their children as inferior to themselves. And Mary struggled with that temptation to see Jesus as being beneath her as much as anybody.
Of
And
course.
that's why John Chrysostom,
Imagine seeing the Logos, needing to be breastfed and, swaddled and taken care of as an infant. Most parents, like, find it difficult to take their children all that seriously because they can recall the time that their children didn't even know how to speak and was learning how to walk. So obviously that it would actually be like a greater difficulty to be Mary in a lot of ways, versus the apostles who meet him when he's a man, and he's like a respectable man. He's mature. He's speaking. He's mature in his appearance. I mean, physically, it's a lot easier to accept that when he's already at that state versus, seeing him as an infant. And like you mentioned, Luke, even if they had some like important news to bring forward to him, to report to him that a family member had died, Chrysostom even addresses that here, that, this would have been like hypocritical since Christ had said he suffered that one man, not the burial of a father, lest the attendance on him should be interrupted. So even if they had something to report about a family member dying, it's already clear from Christ that he told another guy, hey, this stuff can't be interrupted, even for the sake of a burial. So even if they have something like that, it's already been proven elsewhere in the gospel. That's something that's not okay. He speaks, Chrysostom here, in the person of Matthew, you understand. He says, while he yet talked to the people, as if he should say, what? Was there no other opportunity? Why was it not possible to speak with him in private? And what was it they wished to even say? He's saying, like, what did they even want to talk about anyway? He says, even if they wanted to talk about the doctrines of truth, hypothetically, they ought to have propounded these things publicly and stated them before all, that the rest also might have the benefit. So that, while they're being taken away from Christ, at the very least, they would still be hearing something edifying, rather than, taking them away from all edification at the moment. So it's just completely inexcusable, according to Chrysostom. And
Yeah, just read the text. She wanted him to stop teaching. She thought he'd lost his mind. I mean, that's the reality. It's amazing how far we've strayed from just what the plain reading of the text says. The church fathers are not going out on a limb here, guys. They're just reading the Bible. It's really clear. Mary and the brothers went and interrupted Jesus because they thought he'd lost his mind. It's right there.
And regarding William's argument that
Oh, by the way, I want to mention something. I never added Tatian to this list here, but in Tatian's Diatessaron, he adds this section of the going to seize Jesus right after Jesus says he's Lord of the Sabbath. So he actually would connect with that. He thought when Jesus' family members heard that he's claiming to be Lord of the Sabbath, they believed he had just lost his mind.
I thought you did have that. You didn't have that in there?
I think so. No, but I do have Ephraim's commentary on Tatian's Diatessaron, and of course Ephraim the Syrian also thinks that Mary committed sin.
Right.
So maybe he came to the same conclusion, obviously.
Right. Um. So this other argument though that William makes in that clip we watched, he says that that Chrysostom is just suggesting an unsubstantiated speculation, and he emphasizes that there's a lot of perhaps going on. He says this. I looked through it in the Greek again today. There are a lot of different ways to basically say perhaps. I'll put a couple here in the chat. These are like a couple different ways that you can say it. There's a version of perhaps. There's it seems to me, as in like my own personal opinion. There's it's likely maybe, and then there's also taxa, which is possibly. He doesn't use these when he's talking about this. Instead, you actually see, he'll say things like in fact, and it is clear. He says. He says, whence it is clear that nothing but vainglory, kenodoxia. And this part here, I didn't include the Greek here for nothing, but he's literally just saying, like, for no other reason. It's clear that there can be no other possible explanation for what's going on here except vainglory. That's somebody who's extremely confident. He speaks about these things not as just like a potential possibility. He says that the apostle blames her. He says it is clear that the apostle, he is blaming her. The evangelist shows, as in like it's clearly manifested. And I even included this part because I thought maybe somebody might say, well, he says for this very illusion. Well, an illusion can just be like a conjectured inference, but this word here, right here, this just means like innuendo, essentially. And innuendo is intentional. If I said like, there's innuendo in the song, the lyricist obviously like intended for whatever innuendo is being referred to. This is this is inherently, especially within the context even more so, he's making a deliberate allusion is what Chrysostom is saying here. He's referring to Matthew. So everything about it is just clear that this is like 100% a real thing that Chrysostom believes for a fact. I mean, he believes that that she literally had a disease, again, that needed to be fixed and healed, along with the brothers and along with the other unbelieving Jews. He lumps them all into the same band, into the same category.
They would be wiser, instead of playing this game with someone who's knowledgeable, which they will do someday, and they will be humiliated badly. It'd be better for them just to cut to the chase and say, yeah, I think John Chrysostom's wrong. In which case you should say, well, I go with the unanimous consensus of the church. Point to anybody in those early centuries who, give me your earliest example of somebody who just flat out says Mary is sinless, because I can show you everybody saying that she committed sins. And this dumb argument about how they say that she's the mother of God is not going to fly. Many of them say that Mary's the mother of God. Origen says she's the mother of God. And Origen has one of the most explicit quotations about her sins. So you can believe Mary committed sins and call her mother of God. For goodness sake, Cyril of Alexandria had that entire council going on about Mary being the mother of God, and he explicitly says Mary committed sins. That argument is not going to fly with any knowledgeable person. And same with Jerome saying that she was the greatest of all women. Jerome also believes she committed sins. Those are the arguments they'll try to use. They'll say, but she's the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? Being the Ark of the Covenant does not automatically mean you are sinless. Or they will say, look, it says she is immaculate. There's a word in Greek that means totally pure, untarnished, uncorrupt. They translate it as immaculate. And they'll say, look, the Bible says, the scriptures say, or rather the church fathers repeatedly say that she's immaculate. It says that the ark should be made from uncorrupt wood. And they say, that's Mary. Okay, prove that immaculate means completely sinless. Because in the church fathers and in the scriptures, it's talking about someone being sexually pure. That is what it's talking about, a virgin.
Mm-hmm.
Or someone who is celibate. It actually even talks about celibate people. People who may not even be virgins, but they keep themselves sexually pure. And Mary was immaculate. She was a special kind of virgin because she kept both her body and soul totally pure. Now that is rare, guys. Most people are neither pure in body nor in their soul. But there is a select few people who keep themselves pure in body for their whole lives and they devote themselves to God. But even those people have had lustful thoughts. So they may not have joined themselves to somebody else, but they have had a lot of sexual thoughts. They've done a lot of lusting in their lives. So their soul is not pure in that regard sexually, but their body is. And that still has a great reward for those people who have purified themselves, repented of those things. But Mary was unique, guys, because she actually never lusted after anybody. That is extremely rare. She was totally pure in her body and also sexually pure in her thoughts. So she was extraordinary, but she did commit other sins, even if she never committed sexual sins.
Yes. The unfortunate thing is the majority of people who would listen to something like this, who are themselves Catholic or Orthodox or entertain that opinion about Mary being sinless, would just immediately jump to like the most insane conclusion that we're saying that like Christ hated Mary or something like that, which is just totally insane. Mary is an extremely virtuous woman, particularly in her chastity. And it's, Chrysostom says several times throughout this thing, he has a balanced view of Mary. He says he did it out of love for her and his brothers. He says, their regard towards him was as a mere man, and they were vainglorious. He cast out the disease, not insulting, but correcting them, which contain a moderate reproof, but also the unbecoming conduct of his brethren. And that it was not with intent to drive them to perplexity, but to deliver them from the most tyrannical passion, and to lead them on little by little to the right idea concerning himself. This is out of a love for them. He wants them to be good. He doesn't want them... God says he corrects, he disciplines every child that he cares about. Obviously, he loves Mary, and he doesn't want Mary to be destroyed. But Chrysostom does say that she does need that correction. She does need that rebuke. She does need to be led to the truth about who Christ is, along with his brothers. And I saw here, by the way, earlier today, Luke, this same word, it's pathos, is just like the regular... Chrysostom has it as just pathos, but that's what's being used here is the tyrannical passion. You see here, tyrannical passion, pathos. This is what Paul says. He says, "Put to death, therefore, the members which are upon the earth, sexual immorality, impurity, and passion, pathos, evil, desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry." These are the things to put to death. Chrysostom knows that. He reads Greek. So he's just using the exact same word that he knows Paul uses. This is one of the things that you have to put to death. This is something that has to be removed. This is a worldly thing. It's an evil thing. That's why it's vanity. It is a vanity.
Yes, the passions are always spoken against by all the fathers and all throughout the scriptures. Nolan, you made a good point the other day when you were connecting Christ's words in Matthew 10 with the events that happened a couple chapters later, with his mother coming and interrupting his sermon to take custody of him. Or rather, in the Greek, it's very explicit. It's the word seize, like to physically restrain somebody, lay hands on them, and drag them away. So that's what Mary and the brothers intended to do. They were going to forcibly drag Jesus away. But Jesus relates to us, guys, in every way. He warns us about our family members becoming our worst enemies. He says, "Don't think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to set man against his father, daughter against her mother, daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be those of his own household. And he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me." So Jesus experienced that. He experienced his whole family being against him and thinking he's crazy, being opposed to him, getting in his way when he's trying to do God's work. So he related to us in this way as well. Mary, of course, was redeemed. She was forgiven. All of Jesus' disciples made mistakes. I mean, Peter not only denied Jesus, but multiple times he got in Jesus' way, saying things like, "Far be it from you, this will never happen to you." And Jesus had to rebuke him and say, "Peter, you are a stumbling block to me. You're not thinking of God's purposes." Jesus had to do this with even his greatest disciples. So of course he had to do it with Mary. That Mary would also occasionally make mistakes, get in the way of her son, because she didn't understand who he was. We will always point to that one scripture that makes it clear she did not know who he was. This is your great proof text. If anybody wants to tell you that Mary knew that Jesus was divine and all this stuff, she knew that from the beginning, it's not true. It says when Jesus was 12 years old, she still didn't know he was divine, because she says in Luke 2, she says, "Son, why have you treated us this way? Behold, your father and I have been anxiously looking for you." And he said to them, "Why is it that you are looking for me? Didn't you know that I had to be in my Father's house?" And it says, "But they did not understand the statement which he had made to them." So Jesus tells them, "No, my Father was not looking for me. I was actually in my Father's house the whole time." And it says Mary did not understand this statement. It did not make any sense to her. "What do you mean? What do you mean? Your father and I were looking for you. What are you talking about?" Mary did not understand that God the Father was Jesus' actual Father, that he was the only begotten Son. Mary did not understand that. Otherwise, it would not say Mary did not understand the statement. I mean, it's a very simple thing. You either understand that statement or you don't. It's a very simple statement that Jesus is making. "No,
Yes.
my Father wasn't looking for me. I'm in my Father's house." Such a simple statement. And somebody might ask, how is it that Mary did not know Jesus was divine? Wouldn't she have to know that, considering he was born of the Holy Spirit? We have to remind you guys, read the Old Testament. All the Old Testament stories of the barren women conceiving are all metaphors. Well, they're precursors and types of what would happen eventually with Mary. And even Mary herself is a type of the church, who also conceives spiritually. Spiritual children, not carnal children. But if you can see in the Old Testament, you have many miraculous births that seem to not make sense in a physical sense, like elderly women giving birth over and over again, or barren women giving birth. Then you understand that when Mary is finally giving birth, she considers herself to be in that same class. She doesn't understand how it's possible that she could conceive. She doesn't know who the dad is. But, guys, back then, people considered it possible for you to conceive by an angel. Angels did have children. They knew that it was by the power of the Holy Spirit or by the Holy Spirit. They didn't quite understand what that meant, though. They just said, all right, it's a holy child. God has given a holy child to us. God can make as many children as he wants this way, apparently, but they didn't understand. No, there's only one of these. This is God's Son who's come down to be incarnate. She didn't get that, guys.
Yes. And you reminded me. I remember that now. What I had said a while back to you about Matthew 10, I was making a direct connection to Simeon's prophecy about the sword, which would divide Mary. She would be pierced by a sword, and then we have Christ in Matthew 10. When you guys remember, he says, "Don't think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring a sword." and I will make a person's enemies the members of his own household. His own family will be his enemies, in connection to, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring a sword. And so, yeah, that definitely, there does seem to be a direct connection there, I think.
I think so too. Clearly, he is that sword that pierces the hearts of men, reveals their thoughts.
Once again, we find that something people previously never gave a lot of thought to, and they thought that it was something that only applied to everyone else that Christ is talking about, and he didn't actually have to go through it himself. Like we've talked about this before concerning his appearance and whatnot, the lifelong suffering, and when he says something like, don't worry, worrying won't add a single cubit to your height. And that, like we said before, that's much more meaningful if he is a shorter man, a man of shorter stature. And likewise here again, Matthew 10 then becomes that statement about the sword becomes a much more personal statement, because his own family members thought that he was insane.
I'm amazed too that the Catholics don't understand that Peter was greater than Mary in many ways. They give Peter this great, don't they understand Peter is given this huge, guys, the Catholics of all people should know this. They're always talking about how Peter merited to be the Pope because he's the first one to make this public declaration of Jesus being the Christ or whatever. I know that Nathaniel also did this earlier. He said that he is the Christ. When Peter says, you're the Christ, the Son of God, and Jesus says, you're blessed, Peter, because flesh and blood didn't reveal that to you. Now, guys, was Mary making that profession before Peter? Does anybody know the answer to that question? Was Mary saying, my son Jesus, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God? Did God reveal that to Mary? Well, the answer is no. It was shown to Peter before Mary, his own mother. That's very clear from Scripture. It's clear from the fathers too, that they say Peter had that great place. It's strange to me they don't understand that. On the one hand, they'll glorify Peter so much, not realizing that is at the expense of Mary. She was not the first to know that.
I think if we press them on it, they probably just, maybe even subconsciously, just put Mary in a different category. Probably some lame response you'd get is just that, well, just within the disciple group, everybody else outside of the family.
I would say that debate with Michael Snellen is the best at illustrating how weak all their arguments are. They have nothing.
It's desperation.
Stephen, I think that analogy is perfect. Have we ever talked about that? I think it's absolutely accurate if you want to read that story. Let's see here. By the way, Nolan, something that we've never mentioned before, another one of their arguments, in case you guys have never heard this argument, but they like to point to the story of Mary coming to Jesus saying, they have no wine. And then he says, what does that have to do with me? Or as the fathers translate it, what do I have to do with you? My hour has not come. And then she tells the servants, do whatever he tells you. And then you will hear this argument, guys. This is real. This is real. I've heard it countless times. The Catholics will say, now this is an example of the intercession of Mary. Because the servants didn't go to Jesus directly about the issue they were having. Instead, they went to Mary and they said, Mary, will you go ask Jesus to do the miracle, please, to turn the water into wine and give us more wine? And they're like, look, Mary is the intermediary. She's the intercessor between human beings and Jesus. Except there's one little problem. Nolan, do you know what the little problem is here?
I have probably a more complex answer.
Well, they brainwash you, Nolan. They seed things into your mind that are just not real. Like they're tricking you. The scriptures don't say anything about the servants wanting to speak to Jesus. They had no idea Jesus had the power to turn water into wine. Nobody was going to go to Jesus. They didn't go to Mary. The text doesn't say any servants came to Mary and said, hey, we ran
Right.
out of wine. It just says Mary. It just says when they ran out of wine, Mary went to Jesus. The servants weren't the only one who knew. The whole room knew. The whole house knew they ran out of wine. Mary didn't need to get that information from somebody. Nobody went to her as the intercessor. They're inserting that into the text. They're creating that out of thin air. So don't ever fall for that argument, guys, that they say Mary is the mediatrix there. They went to Mary and then Mary went to Jesus. It never happened. It just says they ran out of wine and then Mary goes to Jesus.
Here's what
Nobody
I'm
else even
thinking.
knew Jesus. Yeah, what do you think?
Think about this, Luke. Let's say even that when she approaches Jesus, that she does have, because like it does seem that they're close by, the servants, that she says, hey, whatever he tells you to do it. I think that it's possible that they were there, but if you assume as the foundation that Chrysostom is correct and the other fathers that talk about this, that she was doing this for, again, vainglory, then she would want an audience to see when she approaches Jesus. So Chrysostom says, this is my thinking here, you tell me what you think about this, but this could change how that whole setup even initially took place and how it led to her eventually approaching Jesus. Before that even happened, if she, as Chrysostom said, she noticed that John the Baptist was saying wonderful things about Jesus, and she thought that maybe she could make a name for herself, help her reputation amongst everybody by ordering her son to do this and gaining some credit from it by asking him to do it, then it is reasonable that if that was her aim, as Chrysostom says, she would want an audience there to see her ask him. So she probably did go to the servants and say, hey, my son is really special. He's a really special guy. He has connections to John the Baptist. He can probably do something, if anybody can do something here. And then they maybe accompanied her, and then she goes up and says what she says to him, and then she says that thing to the servants. That's how dramatically that whole thing could change if that is the foundation of the story. Go ahead.
Yes, but I don't even believe it. I believe that she went and told the servants, hey, do what he says, and I think they were just clueless. They were like, huh? What's he gonna do? I think they were like, oh, who's this guy? And she's like, just do what he says. I'm like, okay. I don't think that they ever asked her for help. Remember, Chrysostom is saying she's interfering. She had no business doing any of that. Those aren't even her servants. She is interfering in another house's tasks, and she's trying to solve this issue, and it's for vainglory.
Yes.
I want to read, though, Stephen's asking a question. So I'm glad you brought it up, Stephen. I don't know if we've ever addressed this, but the Cathodocs have another argument. I wish we had a better online Septuagint. Does anybody know of a better one than Brenton's? Somebody find me 1 Kings 2.
I would recommend the Catabiblon one. That wiki translation is good. It's like an updated, better version of Brenton's.
All right, let's jump over to it.
Do you want to go ahead and share screens?
Okay.
I'm not sharing anymore.
Okay. So this is another very, very common argument coming from the Cathodocs. A story about King Solomon sitting down on the throne, and he makes a throne for his mother. Okay. Gonna go down a little bit. Okay, here we go. Everybody see my screen? I'm going to zoom in a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, Solomon sat on the throne of David, his father. I'm going to give you the backdrop just so that I don't have to repeat everything, but they're going to say that this example of Bathsheba, who they think symbolizes Mary, actually it symbolizes the church, but that's fine if they say Mary. We'll concede that. That's great, actually. It's a great argument against them if they want to say that's Mary. They're going to say, look, Bathsheba acts as an intercessor for others to King Solomon, who symbolizes Jesus. And they're going to say, can't you see Mary is the queen? Okay, let's go along with that. Again, guys, this is actually the church, but let's go along with it and say it's Mary. Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was firmly established. Then Adonijah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. Now, guys, remember, Adonijah is the one who tried to take the throne from David. He tried to usurp his throne and actually he tried to kill Solomon and take his throne. And Adonijah was exiled by Solomon to go stay in his house the rest of his life and never come out. So Adonijah is not allowed to talk to anybody. He's in exile. But instead, it says he came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. She said, "Do you come peaceably?" He said, "Peaceably." He said, moreover, "I have something to tell you." And she said, "Say on." He said, "You know the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel set their faces on me, that I should reign. However, the kingdom is turned around, and has become my brother's, for it was his from God. Now I ask one petition of you. Don't deny me." She said to him, "Say on." He said, "Please, speak to Solomon the king, for he will not tell you no, that he give me Abishag the Shunammite as wife." Now I want to point out something, guys. The Catholics always quote this section where Adonijah says to Bathsheba, "For he will not tell you no. He will not deny you." They say, see, this symbolizes Mary. You see, guys, the Catholics will say, you see, Jesus can't say no to Mary. And then they don't say anything else about this section, guys. But I think if any Catholics comes to you, like they did with you, Stephen, or you saw this argument, I want you to say, yeah, I think this is totally talking about Mary. Let's keep reading. I'll go with that analogy. I actually believe this is about Mary. Like, I believe God planted this in the scriptures just so that we could destroy the Catholics. Okay, let's see if he'll deny Mary. "Please speak to Solomon the king, for he will not tell you no, that he give me Abishag the Shunammite as wife." So Abishag was one of the concubines that David had in his bed with him. He didn't actually have relations with her. She just kept him warm in the bed. And he says he wants this woman who was a concubine of David, his father. So that's messed up. He wants her to be his wife. Bathsheba said, "All right, I will speak for you to the king." Is that a good idea? Should Bathsheba be doing that? No. Bathsheba therefore went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah. The king rose up to meet her and bowed himself to her and sat down on his throne and caused a throne to be set for the king's mother, and she sat on his right hand. By the way, the word for bow, it is actually in the Greek, it's not the same as what's the word, proskuneo? I forget what it is. What is
Which
it
one
here?
is it
In
there?
fact, it's an unusual word. Let's see here. The king
It's
was
probably because there's the "and" there.
no,
You see the
no,
"Chi," so it's probably that one
and
after "Chi."
he kata So
Caress.
this means kissed. Well, they're gonna say it's kissed. It's kind of an unusual word. You see that there is no proskuneo. They're saying he bowed to her, but it's possible it's just saying that he
Well,
kissed her.
there's "kata," and then
Phileo is just mean
"phileo."
kissing.
Yeah.
So it just means loved her. He looked down on her and kissed her. Like, it does not necessarily mean he bowed to her. He could have simply kissed her on the head. Phileo just means love. It can mean to kiss. So yeah, Nolan, even these translations are sometimes playing games. It doesn't say he proskuneoed. It just says he kissed her. But they also want to emphasize that Jesus bows to Mary. They're really playing games, guys. Big time playing games. So he kata phileo, or he kissed her. Okay. He bowed himself to her and sat down on his throne and caused a throne to be set for the king's mother, and she sat on his right hand. That's the end of the story, guys. Yay! No, wait a second. It keeps going. Then she said, "I ask one small petition of you. Don't deny me." The king said to her, "Ask on, my mother, for I will not deny you." Guys, the Catholics read this. They say, Jesus won't deny Mary. You need to go to Mary. She'll be your intercessor, because the scriptures explicitly say he won't deny his queen mother. She said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah, your brother's wife." King Solomon answered his mother, "Why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he's my elder brother, even for him and for Abiathar the priest, and for Joab the son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by God, saying, "God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. Now therefore, as God lives, who has established me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who has made me a house as he promised, surely Adonijah shall be put to death this day." So Adonijah was executed. Hmm. 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 Not quite the same vibe they were going for.
So funny because it is kind of like the entire reason that Solomon said to Bathsheba that yeah I'll do whatever you ask is because he's expecting for her to ask for the right thing. And there's
Yes.
similarly a thing in the Gospels where people think that Christ is just saying ask anything, absolutely anything, and I'll give it to you. But you have to ask for the right things from Christ. Otherwise, you ask for the wrong things, he's not going to give you the wrong things, obviously.
Well, I think it's very symbolic. They sometimes will attach themselves to certain things in the Old Testament, and they'll say this is us, this is talking about our church. And I'm not even sure necessarily that it really is about their church, but they are so obsessed with it, and it actually refutes their own position that I'm tempted to think, well, actually, maybe this is for them. Like maybe God really did set this up. He knew they would be obsessed with this, and maybe we ought to use this to refute them. So hey, maybe this really is Mary. I want to point out that Adonijah, his name means my God, God is Lord. That's what it means. The Lord is God, or God is Lord.
You could probably
Adonai
click on it
Yah.
there, Adonias, at the bottom left
Yes.
there on your screen. It might tell you
Yes.
if you click on it. Oh, it doesn't.
Well, I know what it means. Adonai just means Lord, and Yah just means Yahweh. So
What is
it just
Hebrew?
means Lord is God, or God is Lord. Anyway, this is very symbolic, guys. It kind of reminds me of other things in the Bible, word plays, like the fact that Paul says some people say I am of Paul, and other people are of Apollos, because Paul's name is Paulos in Greek, and Apollos. I don't know. It's kind of interesting how there's this antithesis of Paul. There's this Apollos, and you have other weird things like Baal in the Old Testament. You have all of Israel worshiping Baal, which just means Lord. They're all worshiping the Lord, but it's not the real Lord, it's Satan. And that's how the church is today. They're worshiping Satan. I think this is interesting that Bathsheba is trying to replace Solomon, who symbolizes Jesus. She's basically like giving Adonijah a foot in the door to get back into the kingdom. She is letting him in subtly to actually usurp Solomon, and Solomon can see that Adonijah is going to get back at him and try to kill him. And he says, I can't believe you're doing this, Bathsheba. You're basically helping Adonijah get a foothold of my kingdom again and reinsert himself into my affairs, even take my father's concubine for himself as a wife. And you don't see that. Like Mary, or sorry, Bathsheba, you just don't realize you are usurping me, Christ. You are actually unknowingly, accidentally usurping the Lord, the actual king, with what you're doing. And it's not going to fly. You're not going to be allowed to do this. See, I would say there is some kind of parallel here in all the names involved and everything, that there is some kind of symbolism that Mary is being used by these people, these evil usurpers, to replace Christ and take him out of his proper place. And they don't realize it. They think they're doing this harmless, nice thing. They're like, I'm just trying to help out. No, you are actually committing treason against the actual king by doing this. You need to not be using Bathsheba. You need to not be using Mary to get your petitions. And the same goes for that one in 2nd Maccabees 12. Remember the story? They are obsessed with it. I think it's rightful that they are. Do you know the one I'm thinking of, Nolan, about how it says Judas Maccabeus and his men, they go to battle, and they defeat the enemy, but they notice for some reason they were not protected. All of their men were not protected. Usually they were protected and nobody would die, but some of their men died and they couldn't figure out why. And then they went and examined the bodies of the men who had fallen, and they found that they had these little amulets. They had the tokens of idolatry, it says. The tokens of Jamnia, these little good luck charms that were actually idols. And they were not like full-blown idols, but they were like little good luck charms that were idolatrous. And Judas said, this is why they died, because they had these things. And now the reason why the Catholics love this section is because it talks about how Judas and all his men made a sacrifice for them and prayed for their souls, and prayed that God would have mercy on these men, that they might be saved. And so the Catholics will say, haha, this is proof of souls going down to Hades. It's proof of purgatory. The the Catholics will put an emphasis on that. And they just will say this is proof for the idea of praying for the dead, and they'll even try to make it sound like this is one step away from praying to the dead. So they really like this section that's all about making sacrifices and prayers for the dead. But they overlook the really pertinent part of the passage, which I would say is the fact that these guys were idolaters. There is a group of people in Israel who are committing idolatry. They think that they can get away with it. They think they can still fight in God's army, be God's people, but they're idolatrous. And I would say that's you, Catholics. That's you guys. You're the people that this is really about. You're these people that, some people, maybe they're not full-blown idolaters, but maybe they are getting too much into this icon stuff. And maybe they will be saved. Who knows? Maybe there are certain people that we can pray for and should pray for, and perhaps they would be saved despite the fact that they were getting really close to idolatry because they got tricked by these Catholic apologists. Maybe there is some hope for them. But the fact is they got struck dead in battle. They will be judged for it. Everyone will be judged for everything they do. So I can't say I know every single Catholic is condemned.
That being
but the
said,
ones who
though,
believe,
we should
go ahead.
point out, though, Luke, with that they were not praying for them while they knew that those men were actively doing that. It was only after they discovered it, after they were dead, that they prayed immediately. These people had no other hope. If they were alive, you can bet your bottom dollar they wouldn't have been praying for these people. They would have been convincing them out of doing such a stupid thing. But when they were dead, the only recourse at that point, the only option available to them was simply to pray for those people's souls. So we could even then only pray for the people who've just died and have no other option. But the people who are alive, we need to convince with the arguments. We need to convince them to stop doing it while they can still repent in this life.
And those soldiers were doing it privately. They weren't going out making big videos trying to convince other people to do it. But there just is a difference between having one of these little tokens or one of these little amulets. There's a difference between that and having a big idol that you're bowing down to and giving sacrifices to.
Yes.
It's still really bad. It is really bad. But I think it's interesting in the scriptures you have a little story like that where somebody has this little thing. It is a little token of idolatry, and it ends up getting him punished and killed in God's army. God chooses not to protect him. And Judas and the others are saying, oh no, these guys are going down. They're going to be punished in Hades right now. And they said, we have got to offer sacrifices. Let us all pray, beg God for mercy on these guys. So they did. They did it for their former brothers. So there's some kind of lesson in there. Again, in no way are we saying that if you're a Catholic, you're going to heaven, or that any such thing is tolerable. But I do think this section actually does apply to the Catholics. I think that they're absolutely right to put emphasis on this and compare it to themselves. I just think they're missing the really important part of it, which is that there are these people, Christians. Like, you understand, guys, they say this is proof that we should pray for Christians who die, brothers and sisters who die, and who may not go straight to paradise. They're saying we should pray for them that they do go to paradise. But they ignore the reason why they didn't go to paradise is because they have the tokens of idolatry, which is what the Catholics have. And in many cases, they don't just have an amulet or something. They have the full-blown thing. So they are the ones that need the prayer, you see? They are the ones that are in all this danger. They are the example here, and they just don't get that. Like, who's doing this? Are the Protestants idolaters? I mean, it's only the Catholics that are really full-blown into this idolatry doctrine and teaching it as a requirement for salvation. It's more about them than the Protestants, although the Protestants are guilty of greed, covetousness, which are also idolatry. Anyway, here's your answer, Stephen. Does that satisfy you? Or are you still on the call? Yeah, very ironic. You're exactly right. Isn't this crazy that they dare use this section? It's unbelievable. I say concede their argument. The more you can concede, the faster you'll win a debate. The Protestants are very dumb. Whenever they have debates with the Catholics, they want to fight against every single little thing, even the things that are true. And oftentimes they will concede things that they should never concede. Something that just is simply not true. Like, I cannot believe how many Protestants online have been taken in with this argument that we can bow down to icons because Joshua bowed down to the Ark of the Covenant. Who could ever concede such a thing? Did God ever tell the Israelites to bow down to the Ark of the Covenant? No. How many Israelites bowed down to the Ark of the Covenant? One, the high priest. Why was he bowing down to the Ark of the Covenant? Well, because Jesus was on top of it. God was literally appearing visibly on top of it. So who is he bowing to? The ark or the person on top of it? Obviously the one on top of it. How can they concede such a ridiculous argument that anyone's bowing to the ark? That's like saying we're allowed to bow down to chairs because you know that when the king is sitting on his throne, people bow down to that king. So they're bowing to the chair. They're not just bowing down to the king. What? Who would ever assume somebody's bowing down to the chair and not the king sitting on the chair? It's nonsense. Oh, I'm sharing screens. I'm done sharing screens, Nolan.
Nice. We can continue calling here, but I'm going to stop the recording now.
Nolan, will you please go take the extra